Welcome everyone to week 2 of Integrated Marketing Communications, MKT 570. This week we'll be talking about the situation analysis and overall IMC campaign planning. So the objectives are really just to talk about the key parts of a campaign, look at how decision making is progressed through the DECIDE method, and really understand the elements of how to prepare a situation analysis. When we talk about overall IMC campaign planning, the main objective is about consistency. So we want to make sure that all of the objectives are consistent, all of the Marcom tools, all of the platforms are consistent throughout the whole of the campaigning process. And we talk about spherical branding. So what this means is it doesn't matter where a consumer looks at a particular brand, it always looks the same. And what we call this 360-degree planning. So we're looking at a brand from all directions and all points of view. Campaign plan, and that's what the overall objective is for you undertaking this course. Think about an IMC campaign. It's a complex set of interlocking coordinated activities with a beginning and an end. It outlines the objectives, the strategies for different but related marketing communications efforts, uses different marketing communications tools, and conveys different, but also the messages need to be complementary because we want to speak with one overall voice. If we talk about the main components of a campaign plan, the first component is the situation analysis. Then we need to develop the key campaign decisions. After that, we can develop the marketing communications mix. Then decide on the message strategy, work out specifically who we're going to contact, which media, and what the contact points are. And finally, we need to make sure that we're managing and controlling all aspects of the campaign. So first of all, let's look at the situation analysis. It's the first step, and really it's about backgrounding. It's researching and reviewing what's happening in the business and making sure that that's relevant to our overall campaign program. And we need to gather all of the relevant information. So we compile the research and then we try to make sense of the findings. And that's what we call a situation analysis. So the goal is to identify a problem that can be solved with communication. Let's look at the decision-making process overall, and we have 6 steps. And the situation analysis only relates to the first 3. First of all, defining what the communication problem is, identifying the decision factors, number 2, and also number 3, considering the relevant information. In terms of the overall decision-making process, steps 4, 5, and 6 really go to the intent of developing the strategy in much more detail. But for our purposes here, the situation analysis only covers the first 3 steps. In terms of defining the problem, if we can define it, John Dewey said, "A problem well defined is half solved." And there are 3 major aspects to problem definition. First of all, identifying what the objectives are. Secondly, looking at the constraints. And then thirdly, identifying how we're actually going to measure success. So in regard to the situation analysis, we want to identify the key communication problems. So brand analyzers, campaign managers, etc., planners are looking for communication problems that affect the successful marketing of a product or a service, as well as opportunities. Now, integrated marketing communications can solve only message-related problems, such as image, attitude, perception, and knowledge or information. A campaign has to create a desired brand impression influence people to respond, and separate the brand from its competition. So if we're looking at the decision factors, there are two decision factors which need to be identified, and they're related to each other. There are always alternative courses of action, and there are controllable factors which any planner can use to help them achieve their objectives. One controllable factor is the marketing mix. But out there are also a range of uncertainties, and these are uncontrollable factors that the manager cannot influence, but has to identify and make sure that they can react properly to those uncontrollable factors. The relevant information. Okay, so we're looking for information that relates to the alternatives identified by the manager as likely to affect future events. So the major information categories are those related to the industry, those related to the target market audience, consumers and stakeholders, and also to competitors. And in the middle, you see we need to understand the organisation, its competitive strengths and position. The truth is that identifying information can be sometimes difficult. There's often too much information and viewpoints. There's a swathe of information coming from the internet, from social media. So you need to be able to work out what matters and what doesn't matter. And you need to make sure that you're separating fact from opinion. And also, quite often, you'll have to actually create relevant information. Maybe you're doing surveys, etc., various market research. As I said before, you performed a situation analysis when you've been through steps 1 to 3. Let's talk about examples of relevant information in relation to the nature of the industry, the market, and buyer behaviour. Some examples might be, well, let's talk about the structure of the industry, its conduct, its trends and performance. For example, if the industry is going into recession, then that's going to have a certain impact on the brand, on future demand, on the performance, on the profitability of the industry. So you need to know where the industry stands. You also need to know who the competitors are and what are the strengths and weaknesses of competitors, and why are they in business as compared to your own organisation. In a broader sense, and we'll look at this in more detail when we come to the audience, how do your consumers buy? What's the buying process? Where and when and how do they do it? And what alternatives do they consider? Point number 4 is, can the market be segmented? And how do you actually segment this market? And point 5 really talks about what are the requirements for success in the industry. And one of the things that might help you there is that often there's an organisation called IBIS World that produces about 600 industry reports, which you and the university, all university students have access to. So you can find out what are the requirements for success of the industries in which you're looking at by looking at the IBIS World reports. So let's have a look at your own organisation, your own company, the products and other aspects. So what's the organisation's mission and objectives? You can have a look at some of the previous IMC programs run by the organisation. You might have a look at some of the issues which relate to the brand. In relation to the product or services, you need to investigate what's being offered to the marketplace. How have the products performed in the past and present, and what kind of potential do they have? So the other thing about the organisation is you can also look at what factors have contributed to the present situation, and then you can conduct your typical SWOT analysis, or your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So remember, with SWOT, Strengths and weaknesses talk about those factors controllable within the organisation. Opportunities and threats look at the non-controllable aspects by the managers within the organisation. We talk about the target audience, and this is really the critical factor for any IMC campaign. How closely do they align with the target markets? Do the target audiences differ? What kind of market segments are there? What do you know about them? What kind of media do the audiences access? Are they likely to be resistant to you and your IMC campaign? Are you trying to deal with a negative influence, such as in the banking industry and the lack of trust within the industry? It may be that you have to conduct some audience research, whether you do focus groups or surveys or there's a whole range of research techniques which are available. It may be that you can identify personality archetypes within your audiences, personality profiles, purchasing and media consumption habits, etc. And often marketing experts will pretend typical customers, or the typical archetype avatar, and hypothetically profile their consumption patterns so you can predict their influence, your influence in terms of their behaviour. So this is a very, very important section of any situation analysis. SWOT, as I said before, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and you need to be able to do this to consider how this might impact the IMC campaign. Remember that strengths and weaknesses are internally focused and opportunities and threats are externally focused. The strengths, it's positive traits, it's conditions, it's good situations. The weaknesses are perceived as negatives. An opportunity could be an area which a company can develop an advantage over its competitors. The campaign strategy, really all campaign strategies focus on branding or positioning or countering the competition or creating category dominance. So the overall campaign, any campaign, is designed to change consumers' perceptions of the brand's price or price-value relationship. One or more of the objectives could be to increase the size of the market or the share of a consumer's wallet. Even Coke can laugh at itself. Remember, all organisations that develop branding strategies have some kind of purpose, some kind of strategy. Think about the message strategy for the launch of Coke Zero. Use self-deprecating humour with the big idea that Coca-Cola legal department wanted to sue Coke Zero for taste management. The objectives of campaign strategy have to be specific, clear and measurable. And also in the information pack provided to you under Interact 2, you'll see I provided you with the original article by George Doran, who wrote the original 2 or 3 page article on how to specify measurable objectives. So remember that they need to be measurable. And so often or almost all of the time, campaign managers will benchmark their efforts against prior brand campaign or try to predict some kind of logical goal. Effective campaigns tend to try and either entertain, create buzz, engage the customer, provide a memorable connection, or surround the consumer with multiple touch points. They use media to stimulate consumers and activate their responses. Targeting and engaging stakeholders is a very important part of any campaign strategy. Remember what a stakeholder means. It refers to any group of people who have a stake in the success of a company or brand. So this could include employees, and this means that you need to get their buy-in, and this can be managed through internal marketing. In relation to the banks, it could include the mortgage brokers, it could include the shareholders, it could, as I said before, the employees, anyone who's connected with the organisation and who's interested in its involvement. The overall brand strategy needs to have message consistency. It needs to have a heart, a core, a soul, or a DNA. And it needs to be a central concept around which the messages can be unified. And that's essentially brand essence. It makes the brand different and distinctive from all other brands. So one thing to note about effective IMC plans, they also lead to profitable long-term brand relationships. For example, IBM champions a social cause, such as championing world peace. It demonstrates its commitment to world trade and international marketing, and it's been doing this for a long time. The IMC mix, it's really a decision about the marketing communications tools, and this comes out of analysing the strengths and weaknesses and how they can meet objectives. Certain tools are better than others depending on what kind of objectives. For example, often in B2B marketing or business-to-business marketing, personal selling might take a much more prominent place than if you're dealing in the consumer marketplace. So remember, an IMC plan operates with a set of interrelated objectives that specify the strategies for all different tools. And the main strategies cover advertising, public relations, consumer sales, trade sales, promotions, point of service, direct marketing, sponsorships, packaging, specialties, guerrilla marketing, and customer service. And all of these can be used to more or less varying extent depending on what your overall objectives are for your campaign. The message strategies are matched to stakeholders. This is critical. For example, in your assessment, you might decide that if you're looking at a bank, you might decide that you're going to go after the 25 to 34-year-olds. And these are the people that might start to be considering taking out a mortgage. So you need to develop message strategies which relate to this specific market segment. And these message strategy decisions support the overall campaign. And the consistency comes from having a creative theme and the presentation of the brand position and personality. Frontier Airlines, for example, uses Flip the Dolphin. It's a lovable loser who never gets a break. You can find this in the textbook, and you can have a look at this as an example of developing a consistent kind of strategy. Let's have a look at the contact points. Most people think about media. They think about traditional mass media and advertising, but there are lots of other ways to engage and involve and connect with consumers to the brand and to one another. You can have multi-channel and multi-platform. Multimedia planning involves all different types of traditional media. And remember that when IMC planners think about media, they think about multi-platform. Multi-platform, we're talking about whether it's direct marketing, or whether it's sales, whether it's public relations, or whether it's advertising. So that's what we mean by a platform. So it's possible that you can use all kinds of media in various marketing communications functions. Think about the Honda example in the textbook. It maximizes media, and every year they run a campaign launching their Honda CR-V. In Iceland, they use digital media and promotional activities along with more traditional media. You can find examples of that campaign in the textbook. Contact point management, another distinctive feature of campaign media plans, is emphasis on every important contact. Could be a variety of experiential media as well as conventional. Think about all the ways that you can come into contact and develop a brand message when you fly on an airline, for example. There can also be cross-media integration, thinking about how one media can support another. Cross-media integration means that various media work together to create a coherent brand communication. Finally, you're talking about management and campaign controls. You need to be able to monitor, and usually IMC campaigns are usually a fairly complex set of tasks. All campaigns need to be designed to operate within parameters. I mean, you're given a budget, you're given a schedule, and it needs to be evaluated. So you need to be able to identify, to keep on track, on budget, and also on strategy. Budgeting and scheduling. Now, this is obviously a critical element. I mean, if you're a small organisation, you don't expect to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars. You might only have $500,000 to spend, or even $100,000 to spend on your IMC campaign. So all your media plans might need to focus around that $100,000. How can you maximise your dollar value based on just having only 100,000. So the budget determines how many stakeholders can be targeted, how many media and platforms the campaign can support, and the length of time the campaign can run. It may be that you can only afford to run a campaign for 3 or 4 weeks, or for 3 or 4 months, or for a whole year. So the budget allocation is critical to the overall task of a successful IMC campaign. So there are a range of budgeting methods, such as looking at history, how much you spent previously. You could have a look at a task-oriented method, or you could have a look at a percentage of sales method, whichever one seems more relevant and more logical to what it is that you're doing. You could look at how much the competitors are spending, so you try and keep up your share of the overall budget spent by all companies in the marketplace, or it could be based on just this is how much I can afford. The evaluation, marketing communications, they're creating new tools, marketing analytics, Google Analytics, in order to look at the accountability of your overall campaign. Let's just finally just have a note of caution about what we're actually discussing during this whole course. We're talking about integrated marketing communications technology and its use. So we know that IMC is a powerful communications technology. However, this technology is amoral. It doesn't have a moral sense. It's unconcerned with rightness or wrongness of something. So just be aware that we're training a lot of people in how to use this technology, and how users can use the technology for the benefit of its stakeholders and society, or it can adversely affect stakeholders and society. So just remember, it's a moral question all marketing communications practitioners must face as they implement this technology. So just be aware. So you can have a look at the Ben Johnson ad for Sportsbet and ask yourself, well, here is one of the big time cheaters in sport, and how he was promoting a particular cause, a particular product. Again, thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk again soon.